to Unstuck and Alive. I'm Todd Pinkston.
And I'm Stephen Nooner.
We have watched it happen.
Fear gives way to faith.
Isolation melts into belonging.
The stuck places break open and life begins to flow again.
On this show, we sit around the fire, so to speak, and listen to the real stories of everyday heroes.
Men and women who have found freedom and stepped into the unforced purpose they were made for.
If you're tired of striving, if you're longing to breathe deep, break free, and come alive again, then you're in the right spot. This is Unstuck and Alive. Let's go. All right, everybody, welcome to Unstuck and Alive. I'm here with Mark Appel. Mark is working on his MBA down at UT. Notably, Mark played baseball for Stanford and then had a stint in the majors, playing for multiple different teams and even a comeback. I'm sure he'll get into some of that in his story. But most notably in Mark's bio is he was a Way Forward alumni in 2018. And so, Mark, we're excited to have you on. Thanks for your time today. Excited to jump into your story.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, that's what most people are asking about on my resume. Like,
Absolutely.
tell me about this Way Forward thing. Yeah.
Come on. I first met Mark when we're on the back porch after your group arrived from Houston. I think it was a trip from GBC. And, we're playing cornhole. And I'm used to just kind of dominating folks. They're not used to the altitude. They're not quite, they're a little nervous about their trip. Their head's in the wrong spot. And Mark is just absolutely crushing me. And, small talk, it's like, hey, what do you do? And he said, I bounced around in the minor leagues. And in my mind, it was like, maybe that's what he's got me there. Little did I know, Mark had a prolific career as a pitcher and some fantastic eye-hand coordination. So I have since then known to not put too much on the line for cornhole against pitchers. So
that's right. Where is it in the Bible? Pride comes before the fall, Todd.
Absolutely. So true.
Nice.
Hey, believe
awesome.
it or not, there's two guys that in my history of 12 years of throwing cornhole around Way Forward that have absolutely dominated me. Both of them happen to be pitchers that play the majors. So.
Yep. Sounds right.
Y'all's eye-hand coordination is impeccable.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, thanks for being here. Excited to hear your story. Why don't we just jump in? Through your life, milestones, memories, like what's made you into the man you are today, and then we'll drill down in different areas of places you got stuck, how you found freedom in life, and what you're up to now, and where the Lord's taken you.
Love to. I'm super happy to be here and share a little bit about of my story. I think for context, just understanding my family is going to be really important. They've been such a huge influence in my life. And then understanding just some of the cultural things that I, grew up in. And then, I moved when I was 12 to California, which was a big culture shock for me. So I was born in Houston. My parents are, I think, just really faithful followers of Jesus. They raised me and my brother in the church. I went to Presbyterian church on Sunday mornings. I was at a private Baptist school Monday through Friday. I lived in like the Bible Belt bubble. I don't think I heard a bad word until I was like 10 years old. I was as sheltered as they come. But me and my brother were both really tall. We loved playing sports. He was, he excelled at basketball, and that was really his main thing. And I played some basketball, but loved baseball. And so that was kind of our exposure to the outside world. And then we moved, and then all that changed when we moved to California and started going to public school out there, just a little bit better school system and things like that. And so that was, my eyes were, I think, opened in a lot of areas of just like, hearing about how guys might talk about girls in certain ways, being exposed to, temptations and then being exposed to just like, the allure of popularity and trying to, play the social game and all this other stuff. And, I think God drew me to ultimately through a church in Northern California, kind of just drew me to himself, to where I think in my high school years, that's where my faith, I would say, really became my own, where I considered what it meant to follow Jesus and no longer was looking to mom and dad to be that security or confidence of my salvation or my faith. And then I think that just like doubled down when I went to Stanford to play baseball. And so, as you can imagine, sports continued to grow in my life, got better and better and better in high school, and ultimately found myself with a scholarship offer to play at Stanford, which was just surreal. Growing up in Houston, I remember like my 12-year-old year, which is that year where you're in the little league, you're trying to go to the Little League World Series. It's like the little league year. I was baseball crazy, and that year Rice played Stanford in the College World Series, and my dad, pretty smart parenting move at this point, just goes, "Hey, these are two really good academic schools. So if you want to play at a great baseball school, you got to take your grades seriously." And
Yeah.
I took my dad seriously. I was like, "Oh, in order for me to play in the College World Series, I need to have great, straight A's and all that stuff." So education and sports were like a really big kind of place of achievement in my life, and something that I found success in, and that ultimately led me to Stanford. When I was at Stanford, Stanford's an interesting place because, and I say this about my time in California, where I was like, I actually think I got to see God in a more pure form in California than I did when I was in Texas.
Hmm.
And a lot of that is because people go to church not because it's the social thing to do, or there's not a whole lot of social benefit to being a Christian in California. And so it seems like the people that I did meet that were willing to express their faith in California had a sincerity and almost a purity to their faith, that I think is sometimes harder to find in Texas, just because there's so many people that go to church and they go for all sorts of different reasons. So I was really appreciative of that. And I think Stanford really solidified that understanding, because Stanford, is not a place where people are talking, it's not a Texas A&M where, the whole football stadium is filled up worshiping God. It's like we're worshiping God in back rooms
Hmm.
without letting administration know what we're doing. But I think God really met us there and grew just a deep love and desire for Him in our hearts and in our minds. I found a mentor who mentored student athletes. And that was my first exposure, I think, to like real discipleship, like meeting with him every week, talking about life, following some of the ways in which he lived his life and trying to emulate his love for Jesus and his approach to others and sharing the gospel and things like that. So I'm really grateful for just all that time. But that kind of led me to a place where I was ready to go into the real world, and baseball again was becoming an opportunity, a real opportunity to play professionally. And so I really put a lot of my eggs in that basket during that time. And so I was drafted in the first round after my junior year. I was the eighth overall pick. I was offered more money than I would have known what to do with. And I ultimately decided to go back to school for my senior year. A lot of the reasons I made that decision, I mean, there were some education reasons, there were some relational reasons, there were some baseball reasons. But one of the ones that was, I think driving me was I had a chance to be a leader on the team for another year and try to influence some of the younger guys on the team. And I had a chance to, play in Omaha if we were ever able to get there, which we weren't. Like we did not make it to Omaha. And then I was also, I think just able to spend another year with Jim, my mentor,
Hmm.
and just continue to grow in my faith and my love of the Lord. That year, our Bible study grew from like maybe 6 people to about 25 people on the team.
Wow.
We had this like really beautiful, cohesive group of believers in Stanford athletics that we would all meet together on, maybe once a month and worship and pray together and just build community. For my teammates, gave their life to the Lord that fall. Like there were just so many things that it felt like God was really blessing what, what our little, with our loaves and fishes, right, what we were bringing to the equation. And it felt like he was multiplying it. And that was really like a really, really fun part of my life. And then I got drafted again after my senior year, and I was the first overall pick that year. And so it was like, man, everything's just amazing right now. This is so awesome. I'm like, I feel like I'm at the top of my game. I'm playing the best baseball I've ever played. I have great relationships. Feels like
Mm.
I'm keenly aware of the presence of God and what He's doing in my life.
Mm.
And then pro ball starts.
Yeah.
and
Hey,
that's where, yeah. And I think that's where things go a little interesting.
yeah, before we jump into that, because I know that's a huge part of your story. If you were to just take a step back and say, hey, you're gonna do an interview with somebody who played in the majors. They were the first, overall draft pick. They, the year before they were the 8th overall draft pick. They had a career in the major leagues. And you were to say in the first 10 minutes of the interview, they're going to talk about 10% about baseball. I think somebody would say, no way. Like, we live in a culture where, if you want to get to that level, it's got to be everything you eat, sleep, and breathe. It's got to be, the thing you talk about all the time. We define ourselves by those things. And so as you're reflecting back, those years in college, I mean, you talk about a Bible study, you talk about your mentor, Jim, you're talking about guys coming to the Lord. Is that reality when you're at Stanford, or is that looking back at some of the highlights? Like when you were in school, was there like a really good balance on, man, baseball's great, but if it doesn't pan out, no worries. Or were you obsessed with it, but now you look back and you realize, man, there was really some other things going on that were great too.
Yeah, that's a great, yeah, I think an astute observation, because sometimes you can look back and see the highlights, and just remember the really great moments. I think some of the regrets that I might have is, my last 2 years of college, I didn't take my education quite as seriously.
Hmm.
I didn't engage with maybe some of my classmates or professors and build those relationships as well. On a baseball front, yeah, I was obsessed, and I think in some ways a little bit naive about what life with God in sports should look like and feels like. I had a charmed college career, in all honesty. I mean, I had struggles my freshman year and had some adjusting and growing that needed to happen for sure. But like by the time I left, I was widely considered the best player in college baseball. I was the
Hmm.
top amateur draft pick. I was expected to be in the big leagues in just a few years' time and help the Astros win multiple World Series. And that was kind of the path that was panned out. That was expected of me.
Yeah.
But there obviously that isn't exactly what happened in my life. But yeah, during college, I think it was marked by like deep faith, but also like a little bit of naivety in what it actually means to follow Jesus. I had
Yeah.
I think a really sincere and pure heart in my desire to follow Jesus, to grow closer to God. But as you know, and many people that have lived long enough, and I'm still young, like I know I have many, many more years of learning and growing ahead of me. But there comes a time where you meet failure, you meet true resistance, you meet the rock bottom moments of life, and it's like, all right, well, what do you have now? What is
Hmm.
what is next? Where, those moments where like, where are you, God?
Yeah.
It's like I asked that question my freshman year when I had a bad game. I'm like, where are you, God? It's like that's not life. That's not reality.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, you've lost your job, you've lost the structure in your life, you've lost, a loved one unexpectedly. Like in those moments where there's deep, deep grief that is like based in real loss, not just like,
Yeah.
oh man, I didn't perform as well as I wanted to today.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just changes things. And
Yeah.
I acknowledge like I had a little bit of a, sheltered and protected life. Like my parents were really great parents and they wanted the best for me. And they, I think, taught me good morals and values and instilled like good work ethic and curiosity in me. But I don't think it was until I really met adversity that
Yeah.
things started to change. And again, over the years, it's like adversity comes in different forms and phases, and each time you meet it, you dig a little bit deeper, and you learn a little bit more about yourself, and you learn a little bit more about God, and hopefully it produces a faith that's, I think, more sincere and more pure, and we ultimately look a little bit more like Jesus through those
Yeah.
moments. Like when I was 12 moving to California, that was adversity for a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
Is that real adversity for a 40 or 50-year-old who's got mountains of responsibility? No, it's not.
Yeah.
But it was a moment that helped shape my life, and there have been many, many more since, and there will
Yeah.
continue to be more as I
It's
go.
awesome. Thanks for sharing and adding some color
Yeah,
to that story. And man, I just think it's awesome. Like I think it's awesome that you had a you know career at Stanford that produced what you said at the end. That people would look around and say that's the number one player in all of college sports. And at the same time, you're looking at that and saying, man, I had teammates come to the Lord. Like that is just, it's a really cool thing to see. And I like the way you added commentary to, yeah, there was some naivety, but at the same time, you were building a foundation that when adversity came, you had something to stand on.
yeah,
And that started with the way your parents raised you, and I'm firmly convinced that's our role as parents is to shelter our kids. It's like I don't hear that as a negative thing. I hear that as, man, yeah, yes, we don't throw our 1-year-old out into the world to figure it out. We shelter them
yeah,
until the time's right. So okay,
totally.
awesome. Well, keep going in the story. You're drafted number 1 overall. The bottle of champagne opens up. You're on the way to Houston, back to the motherland, and
Yep.
and continue in.
Yeah, no, it was kind of a high for me. It's like, man, graduated from Stanford, I think in my last game, or the second to last game of my career, I set the Stanford strikeout record.
Mm.
So it's like I'm, setting records at Stanford and winning awards, and now being drafted and getting a big signing bonus and all this
Yeah.
other stuff. And then having the idea that's like, man, I'm going to be in the big leagues soon, and going to be working. And looking back, hindsight's 2020, and I'm able to have some perspective on a little bit of what happened throughout my career. I think a key moment that may sound a little weird from a physical standpoint, but it's like I had an appendectomy in spring training of my first year in 2014. And after my appendectomy, like my performance started to suffer.
Hmm.
My body did not feel as good. My arms started to hurt more and more and more. Looking back, I'm like, man, that's a really, like, that just feels like a cop out, or at the time it would feel like a cop out to say that that was a significant moment. But looking back, and talking to doctors and working through some stuff that I had to do later in my career, it was a fairly significant moment that I just wasn't aware of, and how to rehabilitate that and make sure that I was like fully back to my peak performance. And so over the years, like I started to compensate. When you kind of lose some of your core stability, you start compensating, and my elbow started to hurt. Then my shoulder
Hmm.
started to hurt, not in an acute way where it's like, oh, there was one pitch I felt great, and then I threw a pitch, and then my Tommy John ligament ripped in half. Which you hear that story sometimes. That wasn't mine. It was like a slow progression over time that ultimately led me to my first arm surgery in 2016. Between that time, I had worked my way up to AAA, probably mostly on just the fact that I had an incredible college career. I still had good stuff. My command started to decline. Some of my performance on the field was really struggling, but they still wanted me to kind of move up and progress and feel like I had some momentum. But no one's going to give you the opportunity to play in the big leagues just based off of what you did yesterday.
Hmm.
It's one of the most competitive industries, and you have to be able to perform and help the team win today, right now, as it is. And they don't care whether you're the first pick or not drafted at all. Like, the best players are going to play. And so I wasn't playing, even remotely close to being one of the best players to deserve that shot. And so the Astros ultimately traded me to the Phillies. I was part of a 7 or 8 player deal, and I was kind of like thrown in there as, you know, this piece to get, a relief pitcher for the Astros. But I was just part of this package where I think that was a hard moment because I had dreamed of playing for the Astros when I was a little kid growing up in Houston. I grew up going to those games. And then, serendipitously, I get drafted by the Astros first overall. Like I'm now one of the top prospects. And that, like, the dream of like having, even like my parents and my cousins and my grandparents come to games while I'm playing there and living there, I think just shattered in that moment. And, it was like, again, adversity, mark of kind of realities setting in, like, this charmed life isn't always what it's, like living a charmed life is not always going to happen. And in those moments, whenever it feels like things are serendipitous, I think I just appreciate them much, much more because I had so many of those growing up. And I guess they're much like fewer and far between. So I was with the Phillies for 2 years, played in AAA both those years, and hurt basically half the season both years. I had one injury that resulted in surgery, and then another injury that needed surgery by the end of 2017. And by then, I was worn out, exhausted, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, just drained. I wasn't doing what I love doing. I wasn't playing. I wasn't on the field. I was just perpetually trying to rehab and feel healthy again so that I could play. And then decided going into spring training of 2018 that I wasn't going to keep playing. So I called the Phillies and told them, "Hey, I think I'm done playing baseball. Like, it just hasn't worked out for me. I can't stay healthy. I can't figure this out. I've worked really, really hard and done everything that I know how to do right now to be healthy and stay healthy, and it's just not working. I think I need some time to recalibrate, to get my mind right, to, you know, honestly seek the Lord and see where he's leading me. And maybe these are some circumstances that he's saying, hey, baseball's not really going to be your path. And there's still hope, and there's still opportunity, and there's still things that, like, you're not done yet. It's just, you might be doing something that's not what you thought you would be doing. And that can be a tough pill to swallow at times too.
Yeah. So what's going on internally during that? Because I think sports is such a unique deal. I mean, I got the opportunity to play small ball, football in college, and playing football growing up was just a huge part of life for me. It's different than other hobbies. It's different than other careers because it's like it becomes so much of your identity, and the physicalness of it, is so closely tied to how good you are. It's like the how you perform, exactly what you said. It is. I love the saying. It's like you're not what you produce. Well, in sports, you are what you produce. I mean? It's like
Yeah.
it is, and so it's really hard not for that to become your identity. And
Yeah,
so
totally.
when you made that call to the Phillies, was that 4 years in to the bigs?
Yeah. So I was basically, I'd spent three seasons basically in AAA, and then had 2 seasons before then. So this was
Okay,
after my fifth
fifth.
season of professional baseball, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's your
And
what's your mindset there? I mean, are you struggling with feeling like a failure? Are you I mean, just what's if you pull back the curtain a little bit, what's Mark's headspace look like?
yeah, well, after the 2017 season, my dad flew up to Pennsylvania, where I was playing at the time, and I had my truck up there and all my stuff, and so we loaded it up, and he loves road trips, and so he drove back to Houston with me, and we just had a bunch of window time, as I call it,
Mm-hmm.
where we just got to talk and watch the world go by as we were driving back to Houston. And I think I was struggling. My dad's been a great influence and mentor in my life, and I was just being honest with him and kind of being open and just telling him how much I was struggling. And, he met me with so much grace and encouragement, that just reminding me like truth of like, hey, like if I quote unquote fail at baseball based off of the expectations that were set on me when I was originally drafted, and I don't meet those expectations, most people would call that failure. My dad is like, that's not failure. Like in no way does this determine anything about your worth or value or anything like that. So like, you need to understand, ultimately, that what happens positively or negatively in the game doesn't determine anything about who you are and your self-worth. And and ultimately, our self-worth is found through what God thinks of us, and how God, and we know exactly what God thinks of us because of what he did a couple thousand years ago. It's like that's our point of just like remembrance of being like, oh, does God really love me? Yeah, he does. I can look to the cross. I can look to the empty grave. And so that's a really great reminder. My dad's been great in reminding me that. So I've thought a lot about identity when it comes to sports, and it's, I think, simple for us to say, I'm like, the thing that we learned in like Fellowship of Christian Athletes or other things like that is like, I'm not a baseball player, who's a Christian or Christian. I'm a Christian who happens to play baseball, right? And I think that's a beautiful thing to remember. Hey, this is, but at the same time, like, you still are a baseball player,
For
and
sure.
and I think that there is a connection, right, between you alluded to it, like your body. When you're an athlete, like, the health of your body greatly affects your ability to go and do what you love doing on the field. And if your body's not healthy, then your ability to perform is not healthy, is not strong. And and then your opportunities are going to be limited, and might ultimately lead to not being able to play. And so there seems to be a connection between who you are, what you do, how your body is, how your mind is. Like, all of these things are really integrated. And I think the way that God designed us and created us is not for us to be like sticks with a brain, where if we think, then that's all we are. It's like, no, we have to do things with our bodies, with our minds, with, it's like, I'm engaged, I'm not married, but it's like, I think about, it's a weird thing to, I guess, allude to, but it's like, I imagine that most husbands and wives like don't find intimacy through think about their love for one another, but like, there's physical ways in which you get to express your intimacy, right? And I think there's a depth that's obviously reserved for marriage, and you get to explore that in marriage. But it's the same way, I think, with all the things that we do. So it's like, I found so much joy and even worship when I was playing baseball, that was not just mental, but it was like a physical thing that I was like, hey, I'm using my body to bring glory to the Almighty. And I want to do this as much as I can and to the best of my abilities, ultimately for his glory. And when you're limited in that ability because of your injuries and things like that, it becomes really hard. And what I've ultimately landed on is like, regardless of what you think or how you feel, and even if you're like, no, I'm a Christian who just plays baseball, so like baseball doesn't really mean that much to me. It's like, I don't know if that's necessarily the healthiest way to go about that identity conversation. That would almost feel, in some ways, and it's not exactly the same, but it's like, hey, I'm Todd, and I'm married, and I'm a dad, but I'm a Christian who has a wife and who has kids. It's
Yeah.
like, you're like, you love your wife and you love your kids.
Right.
It's like, that's a huge part of your identity,
Yeah.
and
And then in sports at that level, I mean, you're talking about the most competitive people in the whole world.
yeah,
It's like, you don't get there because you go half-hearted. There's
no,
there's lots of people that can throw a baseball, and probably some of them really dang good. But it's
yeah,
like, you got there because you knew what it was like to work hard. So you're not just, I'm with you. It sounds good to like distance yourself a little bit,
yeah,
but it's also like, dude, it's a, you know, whatever we're going after, man, we want to go after it blood, sweat, and tears. Like we want to be
Yeah.
all in, especially if you see it as a calling. Like
Yeah.
if you feel like that's a calling that gives you a platform to share God's love with the world, and all of a sudden, you're not able to strike guys out the way you used to. You're not able to
Yeah.
get off the mound, and be in control of the game. It's like it just, it sends
Yeah.
everything spinning. And I
Yeah.
love,
And
your dad's name's Pat, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, dude, if I just to pause, one, I'm like, man, I teared up when I was when you're talking about the road trip with your dad. It's like that's the dad I want to be, and it's also dad or not, it's like everybody needs a Pat Appel that can
Yeah.
grab them and just say, hey, it's not who you are. It we need to have things in which we go after, and if we don't get, there's some disappointment. I think
Yeah.
that's just life, you know
Yeah.
and
And
then somebody that can grab us, put their arm around our shoulder, on a road trip and say, hey, man, that's not who you are. Like, you're not defined by that.
100%. And another thing I think that makes my dad special is that I knew that he was hurting with me as well.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't this like, hey, don't care so much about it. It's not who you are.
Yeah.
It's like care deeply about it, grieve it, like be
Yeah.
hurt by it, but remember, it
Yeah.
is ultimately not who you are. And I think the things that are worth pursuing in life are the things that should hurt when they're lost.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't imagine anyone caring deeply about something and it was like, Todd, I mean, part of the way in which you express your worship and glory to the Lord is through how you father and how you
Mm-hmm.
are as a husband. And so it's like if God forbid something were to happen to your family, it's like it's not just like, oh well, that's not who you are. It's like, no, that's that's ridiculous. Like this
Yeah.
is a really really just, I mean, you should feel deep pain and grief
Mm-hmm.
over that, right? And I don't want to equate baseball to that, but there is an aspect of like, hey, everything that I did and worked towards, even like, let's just assume, my motivations weren't always like, oh, I'm always doing it for the Lord. Like,
Yeah.
of course, I have my flesh that I have to
Sure.
deal with and wrestle with, right? But on my best days, it's like I showed up to the field to love my teammates, to put in the work, to go in the weight room, to throw a baseball, to compete, ultimately because I knew that it was somehow, some way, in a mysterious way, bringing glory to the Lord, and I
Hmm.
got to participate in this part of my act of worship. And then now it's like this way in which I was able to worship the Lord has been removed from my life. The structure in which I would, it's like I don't have the 8 a.m. wake up call and I have to be at the field at 9 and I have these workouts and I have these drills and practices and then just the in between time with the guys in the locker room. It's like you lose all of that. It's like you don't just lose the act of playing, you lose the structure, the relationships, all of this that goes into it. And it leads you to a place of like, I think, utter dependence on the Lord, where
Yeah.
you're like, okay, I hurt because I've lost this, but I am not ultimately destroyed, because I know there is a God who is with me even in the
Yeah.
pain.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, and I'll fast forward a little bit in my story where I ultimately spent that 2018 year. I went on a kayaking trip with Wes Brazelton and some of the
Yeah.
GBC people. My dad and I came out with a group from GBC for a Way Forward, trip, and that was really special for me and my dad's relationship as well.
Hmm.
Just because there's such an intimacy that you get when you're on the trail,
Yeah.
being removed from technology and just getting to ask those deeper questions, and doing that with my dad was really special.
Hmm.
But ultimately, I decided that I wanted to try to play again. I felt like I had enough left in the tank to give it a shot, but I needed to go have surgery and figure out how to be healthy and stay healthy long enough to make it through a season or two seasons. And that led me to shoulder surgery, which led me to basically a 2.5 year rehab process where I
Wow.
had a bunch of ups and downs, a lot of ambiguity, total uncertainty of whether I could even get back and play. And that fortunately I was able to like make it back and play again. Went back and played a full season in the minor leagues, and then had a chance to come back for what ultimately became my last spring training, or second to last spring training, where I knew that like, hey, this was the year where this isn't like the feel good story of like, oh, the comeback. It's like, I still have to perform if I want to continue to play this game, and ultimately got to play in 2022. And it's funny because 2022 was the year that I played the best. I had moved from being a starter to the bullpen. I went in AAA, and I was like a middle reliever, like pitched 2-3 innings here. And then I was just so dominant that year that they're like, all right, well, let's put you in the 7th inning and the 8th inning. And then I became the closer in AAA. And, in June, I had a sub-2 ERA. I was like just striking everyone out. Like my ball was moving. I was putting it where I wanted to. I was like playing the best baseball I've played in 10 years. And then ultimately got the call. On the flip side, like behind the scenes, I would wake up in the morning, I'd go find a coffee shop, and I just spend an hour probably every day in prayer, journaling, reading, just like trying to spend time with Jesus. And one of the books that I read during that time was Tim Keller's book called Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering. It's not one of his common books because the cover's black and it's about pain and suffering. But as someone who loves Tim Keller, I think it's one of his best books. And it gives such a great like understanding about like who is God in the middle of pain and suffering in your own life. And I read it in a time when I was not going through pain and suffering. I was like, I'm healthy again. I'm playing baseball again. I'm playing it really well. I have great relationships on the team. Like things are going well circumstantially. And there I am reading a book about pain and suffering. And maybe it was just God helping me understand some of the pain and suffering I've already gone through, and then continuing to build a foundation for the pain and suffering I would go through in the future.
Yeah.
Because I get called up and I'm pitching well in the big leagues. I feel like for the first time I have momentum in my career, and then I get hurt again. And that was kind of the beginning of the end, where that led me to spring training where I was still injured, needed surgery, got released. And after I rehabbed my surgery, I was retired. And, now I'm in business school figuring out what's next for me. And I would say in some ways, the last couple of years have been harder than even that 2018 year where I was like worn out and emotional, because maybe in the back of my mind, I knew that like I love baseball and I'm still young enough that I could go back and play if I wanted to. Now it's like, no, I'm done, and it's final. Like there's no door that's going to be open for me, unless I just like am a psychopath and decide to spend the next 2 or 3 years like being crazy, like doing a rookie, Dennis Quaid type situation. And I'm like, I don't have any desire for that. That seems terrible. And the amount of sacrifice, I have too many good things going on in my life to where it's just not worth it. But
you could be a poster boy for peptides make it possible, just right.
I love it.
So 2 retirements before the age of 40. Not many people can say that.
No, I guess it's fun. I'm like, should I call the first one a retirement or a break? At the time, it felt like retirement. I was like, I didn't pick up a baseball. I didn't do anything. I spent a week in the middle of the Colorado wilderness, not thinking about baseball. Or if I did think about baseball, it was like, all right, Lord, help me make sense of some of the things I've gone through. And it's cool. It's cool now looking back, because I'm like, I'm starting to put the pieces together and see a little bit of a story, at least for the baseball part of my life. And I feel a lot of confusion and ambiguity about what the future holds for me. But I'm also like, if I have God, I'm like, it's going to be okay, And that's about the most secure thing that I have right now is just my faith, my relationship with God. So
praise God, man. That's exciting. Thanks for sharing that story. I want to dive in a little into that. I think it's the 2018 to 2022 period where, you drive home with your dad, you decide, man, I'm done. I'm tired. I don't love it anymore. And and there's a lot in there. I mean, there's the physical component. I think there's also just the publicness of, I mean, if somebody graduates number one in their engineering class and gets a job, at a firm, and it doesn't work out, it's like 10 people know. I mean, there's just not that, you know, you were on the cover of Sports Illustrated magazine. It's like people know. And so there's layers of that it's just like, man, that you work through, and the Lord takes you. You went kayaking, you went on a backpacking trip, but it's all, I mean, just a period of your life. I think you'll look back and say that was the wilderness period. Like that was some wandering, and God does a lot in those times. Like he works mightily in the periods where there's a lot of ambiguity, not a great path forward. You ended up finding your path forward. What a story of, just redemption, and truly to get to stand on the mound and play in the big leagues. Like what an awesome conclusion. But I'd love to know, like, you were stuck. You were in a place where you didn't know, what the future looked like. The past 10 years didn't pan out the way you thought they would, or 7 or 8. And how'd you find freedom in that? Like what did rhythms look like? Just what advice would you give to somebody? Like just kind of hammer into that period, and pull back the curtain a little more of what was your day-to-day looking like. And not how did you make the decision to come back to baseball, but what did the decision look like, to pursue the Lord and let go of some of the past and kind of have a fresh start.
Yeah. I think a big question that I would ask at the time is like, why am I doing what I'm doing? I think that's an important question to ask ourselves periodically, just remembering like, hey, let's keep first things first. And
Yeah.
if you don't have, you know, I forget who said it, but it's like, maybe it was something in kind of like the Viktor Frankl story, right? Where he's Jewish man in Nazi
Yep.
Germany, and he writes this amazing book, Man's Search for Meaning. And I don't want to misquote him or even attribute him this quote if it wasn't him. I wish I was more prepared on my quotes, but he basically said like any man can create a how or get through whatever it
Yeah.
is if he has a why.
Yep.
And so the why is one of the most important things. And I got to ask myself like, all right, this is a really, really tall task to go through surgery later in your career,
Mm-hmm.
rehab a surgery, not under any contract, going, out of pocket for most of my expenses, flying all over the country to see different specialists and things like that, doing X, Y, and Z. And so like, I think there was just, a lot that was being sacrificed for it. And if the why wasn't there, then it's like, well, why would you sacrifice if you don't know why you're sacrificing?
Hmm.
And for me, the perspective shift changed of like, I knew that I wanted to play baseball because I wanted to worship God. And what I thought that meant was I would have greater and greater platforms to share my story, which my story is going to be the story of how God has impacted and influenced my life, how he saved me from
Yeah.
myself. He saved me from sin. He's given me opportunity. And, it's a great story. It's the story of like, oh man, God meets someone when they're struggling and now he elevates them to a higher place in which people can know his name.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought my story was becoming. And then it's like, all right, well, the places that I'm being put are actually lower and lower and lower.
Hmm.
And so that was a perspective shift of like, all right, well, why am I playing baseball? I thought it was so that I could be good enough to get to the next level so that I can influence more people for the Lord. And again, that was on my best days when I felt the most holy or whatever it was. A lot of times it's like, oh, well, that also has some other benefits of more money and more fame and, all these other things. And so um, a big why for me during those 2018 to 2022 years was realizing that part of my story was that I struggled through the minor leagues. I had higher expectations than just about anybody. I had more public failure than just about anybody. I had an interview with a writer for Bleacher Report at the time, And he wrote an article, and he texted me the morning the article is posted, and he goes, FYI, I did not write the title or the headline of the article.
Huh.
And so I look at it and goes, it was like, why Mark Appel, the biggest bust in baseball history, is retiring at 26, and then he texts me that evening. He's like, this is one of the best articles, like from a click perspective. It's like just the numbers, like more people are reading and sharing this than we could have ever imagined. Maybe the title was, pretty helpful on the clicks or whatever. But it was just this realization of like, wow, I was at the peak out of college, high expectations. I was at the bottom, public failure. Everyone knows that story in the baseball world. And now I have an opportunity to be back in minor league clubhouses. And these are young men that are seeking ultimate pleasure and ultimate peace and ultimate happiness through a game that is fragile, that is not fulfilling, that is not satisfying. And I know, because anyone in that locker room, I can confidently say I had more higher expectations, and I had a greater public failure than any of them. And because of those experiences, my why became, like, I prayed almost every day. Like, one of my consistent prayers was like, Lord, prepare the hearts of my teammates that I'm going to be with if I ever make it back to a professional clubhouse, because I want to love them, and then give me the courage and boldness to be able to have conversations and share my story and talk about what you've done in my life, and impact them in a positive way. And so that was a big reason for my why of being in the clubhouse. It wasn't necessarily going and performing on the field. It was like all the other stuff that I was just like the gold of my time in the minor leagues that I missed out on because I was so focused on the struggles of my performance. And so it changed my perspective completely. And it gave me a refreshed heart of like, what success looks like for me the second time around is not performance on the field, but it's relationships in the clubhouse. And investing in those people. And that's something I've actually even brought as I took a new step of faith in doing business school. It's like, all right, well, I have classmates that are coming from all different walks of life, and, internationally and here in the States and stuff like that. It's like, that was been a prayer. It's like, hey, Lord, prepare the hearts that they may be receptive to you, and prepare, give me the courage and boldness to be able to talk to them and just share the goodness, share your goodness with them and your love for them. So it's totally changed like how I've seen what success and failure kind of looks like in my life right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was rife with just uncertainty and ambiguity, and just like kind of a daily dependence on Jesus, because it's like, well, I don't know what tomorrow's going to look like, but if I have enough for today, then I guess that's all I really need,
Yeah. Hey, what do people want to talk to you about? Like, I'm so curious about that article being the most, highest opened. It draws people in. When people pull you aside, what do they want to talk about?
They usually want to hear a story from baseball. I think that's super interesting. Sometimes they want to ask about some of my experiences, and I was always interested in other things as well, like doing random investments in stupid businesses or whatever it was. Traveling, like I got a camper van a few years back, and so it's like just doing kind of random trips and stuff like that. So most people are curious about baseball. Like I had interviews for a summer internship, I'm like, oh, this is what the real world's like, and so I'm doing interviews, and the guy interviewing me is like, oh, wow, I saw you play baseball. Like, tell me a little bit about your experiences there. So like, it's just unique and interesting. But it's funny because it's like, I think sometimes that there's a lot to my story that some people will expect one thing. Like you said, hey, you're talking to a baseball player and he's just talking about other things besides baseball. I think that's been a pretty common theme, to where I want people to know me not as the baseball player, or not as, X, Y, and Z, but just like know me as how God's created me and designed
Sure.
me. And that, I think, requires a little bit of faith and vulnerability and sharing some of the struggles that you've gone through. Because
Yeah.
I can't explain why I am who I am without explaining some of the harder points in my life, and then explaining how God has shaped and molded my mind and my heart to be more conformed to his will.
Yeah. That's interesting. I I just had the thought when you were sharing that, I wonder if people that read the headline to the article didn't think to themselves, that describes me, and I'm curious how this guy's going to work his way through it. Because, we follow athletes and we put them up on a pedestal because it's like a drug. It's like drinking too much. It just kind of gets us out of our day to day. It's like, man, if I can, fall in love with this quarterback and, just watch him play on Sundays, it's like I can escape from reality. But I think deep down, the headline to that article describes how we really see our lives. Like, man, if you close the door, we think I'm a complete failure. I'm screwing everything up. If you knew me the way that I knew me, you'd never want to have this conversation with me. Man, if I can't even keep the four-letter words in my mouth when my kids mess up. I mean, we think all these things, and I wonder if that the Lord's not going to use that season of your life that you went through to break down walls for people, because it's like, yeah, I've had public failures. I've had more. You can tell them I've had more public failures than you. Like, man,
Mhm.
let's talk. And I don't know. That's just interesting. Like, sure, we're all going to read, and that's absolutely a catchy headline. Whoever wrote it, one,
Yeah,
should be
for sure.
taken out back and slapped, but second, should it's like he knew
Also
what he
get a
was doing.
promotion in some
Sure,
ways. He's doing
sure,
his job. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. But I wonder. I mean, it's just like we just don't we celebrate success and we don't talk about failures. And I
Yeah.
think that's what happens on trail is you sit around the circle and you hear these people talk and you're like, dude, no way. Like, I thought you had it all together. I
Mhm.
look at you at church and I see your family. Man, I thought you would, I thought you were the perfect human being. And now you share your story and you create these much deeper bonds. And I think something happens like that of, you see this person that, oh wow, he didn't reach his potential, and it's like, yeah, neither have I. And I
Yeah.
just wonder if that makes it more relatable. So, but
I I think people are interested in failure because I think everyone identifies with it at some point.
totally,
And like we every person knows their failures more intimately than anyone else out there. And
totally,
just a little bit how we're wired is like we focus more on those than we do our successes. We have this expectation that we put in the work and we do X, Y, and Z, then like things are going to go well. And like maybe we've believed a lie that's like you can do anything you put your mind to, and
yeah,
you got to believe it and you'll achieve it and all of this other stuff. It's like, man, those are really catchy like bumper stickers. Like
yeah,
I'm for catchy motivational things, but when it crosses the line of like setting up expectations that are so unrealistic, we're setting up ourselves for a deep level of disappointment. And that disappointment can be really, really difficult to
yeah,
deal with. And I'm not saying I guess I'm an expert in some ways of like large disappointments, but I still am figuring out how do I deal with disappointment, because there will be
hmm,
disappointment in my future, whatever it is. Like I haven't had kids. Like I can only imagine how many times like there's you're like, gosh, you're trying to teach your kids something, and it feels like they're learning, and then they just go and do the opposite thing, and you're like, man, is there something wrong with me? Like, why are they not responding
sure,
how I want them to respond? Or at your workplace, or in your marriage or your relationships or whatever it is. It's like there's just expectations and disappointments. I don't
hmm,
think the answer is like just expect that things go poorly, therefore never be disappointed. It's like, no, do your best and expect that things will go well, but know that they might not, and know
hmm,
that really, really well, and be prepared for when they don't, and don't be shaken by it. Don't be
yeah,
surprised by it. Know that that's part of And maybe the most helpful thing I can provide is like, whenever I've seen disappointment, like I see it more as opportunity for
Yeah.
growth and for getting to grow closer to Jesus. Like if that's the thing that puts us on our knees more, then like praise God, because you're on your knees praying to Jesus, you know? Like I have a good friend who we just went through consulting interviews. That's like the big thing in business school. Your first semester, it's like you're trying to get an interview for the summer internship, and a lot of times that summer internship goes well, and you get a full time job after that. Consulting pays really well. People are investing in their schooling, so like getting a consulting interview and then an offer after the interviews is like a really big deal. I have a classmate who I'm close with, and he got one interview invite and then he got rejected after the interview. And he's really disappointed. Like I just know it. You can feel it. Like you talk to him and he's sad and just broken up about it. And in my mind, I'm like, oh man, like this is the sweet stuff for you. Like this is where you get to dig deep. You get to, figure out what you're made of. You get to see 5 years from now how this rejection open the door for the thing that was going to be better for you all along. But you don't have, when you're in the weeds and you're in the thick of it, you don't have that experience and you don't have that perspective. And so, like, I think it's my job to walk alongside with him, hurt with him, grieve with him, but also encourage him and say, man, keep going, because all the work you did to even get to that point was really good work. And that will compound. And at some point, you're going to be able to see how none of it was in vain just because you didn't get this offer. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I think that's true for all sorts of, all walks of life, all areas of your life, all disappointments. It's like, keep going, like just keep going and know that, like, don't think that everything's okay if things aren't, but it's like, just know that even if they aren't okay, ultimately they will be. And just keep one foot after the other. And sometimes it gets really hard and your feet feel heavy. And sometimes you're, feeling like it's light as a feather and you just are running so fast. But
that's good, man. That's rich stuff. And Mark, I can tell you the thing I admire about you, and I don't know, we haven't overlapped a ton, but it's clear in somebody when you meet them, you've got a humility that just it oozes out of you, that you're grateful to be around people, like the gratitude for where the Lord has you, like it's just there. And man, I'm grateful for that. Thanks for sharing your story with us. Thanks for diving deep in some areas that some people would cover up or pretend like didn't happen. And man, you really are using that as an opportunity and leveraging that. And what a gift that'll be to the world. The next 2/3 of your life that you'll get to have that as, you help people see the hope, even when they feel like hope is gone. And so thanks for that.
Thank you.
Are you active on social media? How can people follow you? I have no doubt that, whatever you do after business school, that ministry is going to be a part of it. So we'd love for people to be able to find you and connect with you.
I love the idea of like being able to plug my socials, but I've been off social for a few years.
Come on.
It's been great. I think it's just been, I don't have, there's a lot of science and research about the dangers of social media, but I think for me, it was just becoming a distraction and a comparison tool that wasn't healthy. So I just eliminated it, and I still have something, but I'm not active on posting. I'll sometimes just try to follow some friends, because sometimes that's a great place for getting news these days. But no social media, no place to follow me. If I end up starting something, then, I guess I'll start it. But for now, flying under the radar, and I'm enjoying it.
There you go. You got to go walk the halls of UT Business School to find Mark Appel.
That's right.
Well, Mark, thanks for your time, man. We've blessings on your future marriage, and you're going to be an incredible dad with a great role model, plus the experience of life. You're going to bring it into your role as a husband, as a dad. So thanks so much for your time today. I know it'll be a blessing for the folks to get to hear it.
Yeah. Thanks, Todd. I really enjoyed it.
You bet.